All right, everyone. Thanks for coming back on online with us here for the final talk of our virtual MeadCon here, and that is of course led by Sergio Moutela of meadery, president of the AMMA. He's going to talk about basically everything he's learned in 6 years in business. Sergio and I have meaderies about an hour apart from each other, and effectively never see each other, which gives you a sense of what it's like to run a meadery if you're in planning. But we've had the pleasure of sharing quite a few laughs and at stories and shared experiences. So I know you're going to have a great time listening to some of the stuff he's learned. Once again, if you're just joining us, thank you as ever to Tim Lieber and Spacetime Mead Insider Works for sponsoring virtual MeadCon. Thanks to the MMA board and to all the members and all you guys for making this possible. Sergio, tell us what you've learned.
Well, thank you, Greg. Learned quite a bit. So first off, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Could you confirm that you can see it, Greg, just to make sure? All right. I already got confirmation in the chat. All right, great. Thank you, guys. All right, so
Yes.
yeah, this is, well, let me introduce myself, I guess, a little further for those who might not know. My name is Sergio Moutela. I'm the founder and mead maker at Meadery. We're New Jersey's first ever meadery. I've also helped it be possible for other meaderies to open up in the state, and I'm really proud to say we have 3 meaderies with another 2 on the way. So really exciting stuff as far as that goes. A lot of people might have kind of like started hearing about me. I started posting up a bi-monthly blog series called What I've Learned Since Opening My Meadery. So what I've learned in 2 months, in 4 months. I believe I did it almost all the way up to a full year's time, actually. Give me one quick sec as I make sure the waiting room is disabled. Okay, it is. Just wanted to make sure nobody gets delayed into joining the presentation. So anyway, I wrote the bi-monthly blog series of what I've learned since opening my meadery with the new blog post every 2 months. Gave a really in-depth insight basically into everything that was going on, everything that I was doing, everything I've learned, the mistakes that I've made, challenges that I've won. So a little bit of everything kind of all rolled into one, and developed a pretty decent following. It was a really great insight into owning and running a meadery that nobody else is really providing. And I just like sharing a lot and sharing my experiences and especially my needs with everybody. So that was really cool for me and basically everybody else who read it from what I've heard. I also kind of put together the TASNA nutrient regiment. Mead Made Right. I started that website mainly just to kind of get the information for TASNA out there to everybody, just to have one centralized source instead of having to basically type it all out for everybody or everybody asking where they could get that information. That started out as that, and then I started up hosting my own podcast for that, just because I wanted, one thing I love doing with as far as mead goes is building recipes, and one of the things most mead makers want more than anything else are recipes. So I figured I shall provide my services, provide something everybody wants while doing something I actually love doing. So we started that mead podcast, and we've had quite a few guests on the show and had a good time doing that. Just as an update as far as that goes, planning on probably starting that back up in December after Thanksgiving week. So look for some new episodes of that. And I've served on the AMMA board of directors since 2015. The last 3 years, I believe. Yes, the last about 3 years of which I've been the president of the AMMA, and proudly so. So with that said, don't mind me if things go a little weary with the presentation. I haven't done this on Zoom yet. So So here's some snippets that I'm going to have and some quotes throughout this presentation. This is from my 16th month blog post, 16 months after opening my meadery. And this was one of my favorite snippets from all of my blog posts. So it went, here's the nitty gritty. The biggest expense your business will ever have is success. Let's get new tanks so we can start statewide distribution in New York and New Jersey. Well, we'll need a bottling line to bottle all that up. So let's get a bottling line too then. Well, we're gonna need to get the electrician in here and an 80-gallon air compressor to get it all up and running. And you can only get a compressor that size on special orders. So it's gonna take a few weeks. In the meantime, we could continue hand bottling everything while we look at this shiny bottling line just sitting in front of us here. Okay, fine, get it done. Great, the new tanks just came in. Let's get them filled up. Ooh, ouch. It's gonna cost how much just in honey to fill up our additional 10,000 liters of tank capacity? And what? We'll also need a bigger glycol unit to control all of that. Okay, here comes Mr. Colossal Glycol Unit. And mind you, we still need $1,500 worth of glycol to just fill that bad boy up, plus shipping. Can someone tell me if we have any more money to buy honey, please? That was the whole point of all of this, wasn't it? And nobody tell me how much it's going to cost to bottle and label all of this mead once these batches are done. So dramatic, isn't it? So you want to be a meadery owner? You should. It's awesome. If you don't mind picking up a few scars along the way, that is. Mead will dull the pain. So this was honestly, I think, one of the best snippets from all of my blog posts, because it really kind of gives you an insight into what it's like to kind of operate a meadery, especially one that's like growing, or at least really trying to grow. You know, it's, and the first line, or the second sentence of this whole thing is, the biggest expense your business will ever have is success. It's so true. You know, to grow, it costs a ton of money. And sometimes it's like, all right, yeah, just like this whole snippet says, you know, let's get a bottling line, or let's start distribution actually. Well, we can't start distribution with just the tanks that we have. There's no way we have enough tank capacity to do that. So we need bigger tanks. But when you get bigger tanks, well, I mean, we could bottle up 4 1,000 liter tanks by hand with some volunteers like we did all the time in the beginning. But we estimated it would take a full 24 hours straight with no sleep or breaks if we wanted to bottle up just our one 4,000 liter tank. And that required 7 people to even accomplish that in 24 hours. So, you know, how can we really do that if we're getting a 4,000 liter tank and another 3,000 liter tanks? It's not as simple, right? So now it's like, well, all right, if we're going to do that, well, we might as well get a bottling line. Well, if you get a bottling line, then you need this. The new tanks require that. And that requires $1,500 worth of glycol. I mean, you kind of get where I'm going. It's like I said, this is the perfect kind of like peek into what it's like running like a growing meadery. So I really always love this little section of that 16th month blog post. So, and again, yeah, 16 months, a year and 4 months since opening the meadery. This was what I was kind of going through, what was going on in my head. All right, so speaking of the bottling line, this is the bottling line, actually. This was actually after we had to add in an automated corker. So we actually had to extend the bottling line after the closure manufacturer that we used, Zorks, went out of business. We had to then upgrade to an automated corker to keep up with our bottling line, because the Zork attachment on our bottling line was then rendered useless. Go figure. A little bit more on that in a little bit, though. But here's a nice shot of our bottling line here. Really fancy, but fancy looking, but really simple, super efficient. And you see all those gears and gauges and everything that's going on, all these buttons and switches. This thing comes with no manual whatsoever. So we had to learn exactly how this worked, and learned it quick. That was fun. So looking back at everything over the past 6 years, these are some of the key points that I've kind of put together here. you can't homebrew your way into a successful meadery. You know, you're no longer just making small batch stuff, even if you're, you know, even if you're making 40 or 60 gallons at home, like some people might do, the real, you know, obsessive enthusiasts. You can't just homebrew your way through, you know, into a successful meadery. You have to consider what you're making. You can't just make what you want to make. You have to make what your customers want to drink. That's, I think, like a really huge point that some mead makers might not understand, or they do understand and just refuse to accept. Um, Also, there's a ton of regulations and paperwork and tax filings and label registrations, and you get into distribution, that becomes even you know, even more difficult and more elaborate, because every state has its own unique uh, criteria for everything that they require. And mead clubs are gold. That is 1000% true. I'll get into more detail on mead clubs, but mead clubs have been, our mead club has been a savior for us ever since day one. Like I said, I'll get into more details about that, but that is one of the biggest key points that I could really put out there. Looking back, that was one of the best things we ever did, and luckily we did it pretty much right from the start. Software to manage it all, especially on the mead club side. The bigger your mead club gets, forget using Excel. You're just asking for problems. Um, but not just for club management, but also obviously for orders and your you know, CRM module to keep on top of customer records and their orders and their information and all that good stuff. I mean, the if you're small enough, you can use Square. I mean, actually, I know some eateries that are about the same size, if not even a little larger than us, that still use Square and other more common like POS systems. But I really went full force into getting a winery specific software, and I've actually been through uh, three different software companies, technically four, but that was because the second one got bought out by a larger one and kind of rebranded and changed some things. But software was really key for us to be able to manage everything, especially a winery specific software that really keyed into everything, exactly what we want and really what we need to really optimize everything that you know, some of the most successful wineries are able to do and keep on top of. So one thing I always give as far as advice to new people that are looking up to open up a meadery is start bigger than you expect. Um, the picture here on the right is a small portion of actually the picture. I have the full picture on the next slide. But we started off with 4 1,000 liter tanks, and we immediately knew that we were going to need larger tanks because by the time our next batches were about to be ready, we were pretty much almost all out of stock, and that was just doing everything by scheduled, you know, reservation, tour, and tastings in house with very minimal online orders. Staying small is okay, but the but meaning you can stay small as a meadery, but I always feel like you need to get big enough, quote unquote. In other words, if you stay too small, what's going to happen if you're the main person responsible for the day-to-day operations? What if you're the only mead maker? If you get hit by a bus, can that meadery continue to survive? You know, whether you're injured or dead. I mean, honestly, either one, basically. Even if you're just injured and you're going to be bedridden for, you know, 2 or 3 months and how to get knee surgery or whatever the case is, can your business survive? And if you're too small, the answer is most likely going to be no. So saying small is okay, but I always feel like you should get just large enough where you kind of have some backup. You have some other people that could pick up the pieces and pick up the slack when you might not be able to, whether it's out of your control or not. Success is expensive, like I mentioned before. It really is. Growing pains are real, man, and the bigger you get, the more expensive it is. You can't just say, "Hey, I'm going to go from making 1,000 gallons a year to 20,000 gallons a year, and expect it to be that simple of just getting new, bigger tanks." To fill each one of those really big tanks, costs a fortune just to fill them. And then all of the bottles and all of the labels and all of the corks, then that expense even comes afterwards. And mind you, if you're taking, let's say, even as short as like 2 months to 4 months to have standard strength meads ready to bottle up, now you have all this inventory from these huge tanks, these huge production runs, and you've spent all that money to fill them, all that money for all the packaging supplies and labels and boxes, and now you have to take up floor space or pallet space to hold all that inventory. Well, all that money you just spent, now you got to wait for every dollar to come back little by little, right? So you're laying out a ton of money, especially with really large production runs. And then you're slowly getting that money back, obviously with profits, hopefully. But we're going to see a real slow return on investment on that. So, I mean, the bigger you get, the more expensive it is. So, I mean, is the definition of success getting bigger? No, I'm not saying that either. And I don't want that to be misconstrued either. I wouldn't say that is, but what I should have rewarded it is, growth is expensive. It would probably have been a better way to actually describe that line, that bullet point there. And big time growth in the first year. I always really make it very clear that anybody who opens a meadery should focus on big growth the first year, just as much sales as possible. Do whatever you can to make as much money as possible that first year to 2 years, really. Because during that time, that's when you're hot. That's when you're new. That's when everybody wants to check you out, taste your product, buy your bottles, right? Take advantage of that and get, grow as much or at least grow your sales as much as possible those first year or two, and really take advantage of that. So that way you can either just finance your own expansion if you want to go that route, or just put that money aside as a nice pillow, nice little padding in your bank account to cover, unforeseen expenses or anything. Take a vacation and say, hey, we're closed for the whole month of August, whatever. Just take advantage of that honeymoon phase in your first year or two as a new meadery, and make as much money as possible, pretty much. So here's a picture of our first production setup. It was 4 1,000 liter tanks and 2 300-liter tanks. You can see one to the right. There was one to the left of these 4 tanks. And then we had our secondary vessels, pretty much were 300-gallon flex tanks, which were right above them. We got this idea for putting a pallet rack over our tanks. Was one of the best ideas we ever had. And it was given to us by a friend of ours that came by just to check out the place. And we were already crammed and running out of space. And it was just within the first few months, basically. And he suggested, why not just putting the first few weeks, actually, why not just putting a pallet rack over the tanks? And we thought that was genius. And we've done that ever since. For the size of operation that we have, we are in a very small space for the size of production capacity that we run through, and we're constantly having to move things around. So this was a very simple setup for us. It worked out great for the first few months, but like I said, we quickly realized that we really needed to get a lot bigger. These 4 1,000-liter tanks here coincidentally found a new home. We sold all of them to Mike Tripka down at Beadtown Meat and Cider in South Carolina. I luckily got to visit them. Mike and his wife, as well as my tanks, got to visit all of them basically on my trip down to Georgia this past end of January. So we took a quick drive over there on our way to Savannah to judge the Domers Cup, and took a little stop in to check out my tanks and check out Mike's meadery. So yeah, we've since sold these and got us some new bigger tanks. So this is not a current view, current representation of our production area now, but you can see the bottling line on the right. We have 2. We actually still had those same 1,000-liter tanks. scattered around there. I should have actually thought of taking a new picture of our current setup, because as of today, we've actually added in another 8 tanks into our production area, most of which a little smaller. We got like two two-barrel unit tanks, 2 1-barrel unit tanks, a half-barrel unit tank for me to just like really mess around with, and a 5-barrel and 2 10-barrel unit tanks as well. So we've been slowly kind of building up to really start hitting draft mead production for distribution, and a lot more effective draft mead production just to feed the tasting room in house, actually. So yeah, so you can see the vast difference between this and this. This was so simple and clean and good looking, and we painted half of the wall black to make the tanks pop out. You know, we were really all into all these cool little details, and then eventually we were like, just screw it. Let's just fit as much as possible wherever the hell we could put it, because things are just getting out of control and we just need the space. So anyway, and we still have those 300 gallon flex tanks that you see at the top left here on the pallet rack. This whole pallet rack was, in the previous picture, was literally on the opposite wall on the right of this picture. And then when we got our bottling line, we moved everything over to the left. We also have, we actually sold 2 of those flex tanks, those 300 gallon flex tanks to WA Meadworks, to our buddies up there. And we have 2 sets on the bottom right here. We have 2 sets of these 80 gallon flex tanks that we're actually planning on trying to get rid of to get something different that we could kind of stack instead of these 4 individual 80 gallon flex tanks. We're currently using all 8 of them right now, but we use these for like splits or small secondary additions for certain things, or just experimental stuff like that. So we have a lot of fun with these. These are just kind of like our mess around tanks. A lot of really cool one-offs come out of these, and it's a lot of really fun stuff comes out of these things. This is our tasting room. This is our tasting room during a bottling day. So we bottle up in like the middle area of this production space right in front of the bottling line. Let me go to the next picture again. And as we stack pallets, we then move them into our tasting room, and we start stacking them up or lining them up down the tasting room, and get to where we can't fit anymore in the tasting room and in the production area. You can actually see those 80 gallon totes in the bottom right here. We were actually bottling right out of one of those. We had just finished bottling out of that one. Which mead was that? That was by the painter's tape on there, Peanut Gallery. That was our big dessert style Bochet aged on roasted peanuts and oak. That was a good one. So anyway, moving on. Stuff happens. Some of the things that have happened, Zorks to corks. Like I said before, we used to use Zorks for all of our bottles, and the Zork manufacturer went out of business, and we were kind of stuck. We had already invested, basically a third of our bottling line was literally built just to apply Zorks to bottles. And once Zork went out of business, that section of the bottling line literally got rendered useless. It was actually cheaper for us to buy a new automated corker to attach to the end of our bottling line than to call somebody from the bottling line manufacturer in Italy to come by and convert our Zorker to a corker, basically. So in the meantime, we didn't even really have that kind of expendable cash on hand either. So we got creative, which I'll get to in a little bit, to try to raise some funds in order to even pay for that corker. But in the meantime, during that transition, we were hand corking thousands of bottles while standing in front of a automated bottling line, which was so weird. So we were running everything through the bottling line, but just bypassing the Zorker and just grabbing the bottles off the labeler and hand corking them at the end. It was like the weirdest, most surreal thing and ridiculous thing I've ever seen in our meadery. But we literally had 2 people operating the manual corker, by the way. One person would grab the bottle and put it on the corker. The other person was basically replacing the cork in the corker and grabbing the bottle off of it after it was corked. It was super efficient. I think we actually had posted up a quick 15-second video of that corking action, but super, super efficient. We moved through thousands of bottles, but a lot of us had calluses on our hands and really bad backs. That was not easy. But the point of that whole Zork to cork bullet point here is I've learned to not go with the fancy closure or even the fancy bottles, which is the next bullet point here. The fancier, more unique, more hard to get is a lot more riskier for stuff to happen. Like I said, we really got put into a really bad position when Zorks went out of business. Luckily, our supplier of Zorks gave us enough of a heads up that it was about to happen. So luckily, we had a little bit of some preparing time to get through that a little bit easier rather than not. And, part of me just wishes we had just used corks from the very beginning, to be honest. I really do wish we could have just used corks in the very beginning. Standard bottles gone. The standard bottles that we used to use all the time in the beginning, supplier decided not to use them anymore, not to supply them anymore, not to carry them. Great. No heads up whatsoever. It happened again, actually, with another supplier when we switched to a new bottle. And that supplier ended up saying, yeah, we're not going to carry that bottle anymore with no heads up. And now you have, all of your tanks filled, ready to bottle up and nobody to order bottles from, or at least not from your normal source. Now you got to go shopping around again like you're like day one, new meadery owner looking for a new bottle supplier. And, it's happened to us where when that happened the second time, we actually – the only place we found was out in California, and let's just say supply and demand, because we paid an arm and a leg for those bottles. And go figure, we ended up finding a supplier literally in South Jersey, this small wine supply shop that also offers some commercial equipment, happened to carry the same exact bottles. So ever since we had switched to those bottles, we could have literally have just had an in-state supplier supplying those for us. And you know what? They were a really great price, about what we were paying with the original supplier, and right in state, and saved a ton on shipping. So anyway, equipment failures. Equipment could fail at any given time. You never know what's going to happen. And a pump could go out. Your glycol chiller could die off. Excuse me, 1 second. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry. All right, so sorry about that. Yeah, equipment could just go on you. Your glycol chiller could go off in the middle of the night, or just fail on you completely. And ruin some really sensitive fermentation temperature batches. Your bottling line or bottling equipment could just break down. Anything could really happen. So you always really got to be prepared and have kind of backups for everything, I've learned. Stalled fermentations, that can happen whether you manage your nutrient regimen, nutrient additions or fermentation temperature. I mean, normally we're temperature controlling fermentation to prevent it from getting too warm. What can happen, which has happened twice to us actually, 2 years in a row, about 2 or 3 years ago, where we had such a drastic temperature drop overnight, and we like to keep our production area relatively cold. So one night it just dropped like 40 or 50 degrees, and the inside of our production area just got extremely cold and actually dropped the temperature of one or two of our tanks, enough so where like the fermentation literally just stalled, and for whatever reason didn't want to kick back up again. I mean, something as simple as that can easily happen. So you got to kind of like plan for that. How do you plan for that? Well, has some like some restart protocols already in place, so you know what to do, and you have like that restart fermentation, yeast selection, whichever one you go with, and everything else you might need for that, ready to go at any given time. Be prepared, right? Sometimes a batch isn't what you expected, right? You know, I still to this day have never dumped a batch, at least on purpose. There was one time some of it got dumped by accident. I won't even get into that, but don't take a phone call while transferring a batch, put it that way. Um, so sometimes a batch is not what you expected. So, what are you going to do? Sometime, like I said, stuff happens, and you got to be able to kind of either willing to figure something out on the spot to correct that batch, change it into something else that you might be happy with packaging and asking people money for, or also sometimes, a lot of the time, actually, if I'm not happy with something, we'll just put it aside, we'll rack it into a tote and stick it in a corner and just forget about it. And there's been a few times where we've literally just an idea just pops into my head. Sometimes it's happened a year and a half later, and I said, you know what we could do with that batch over there, and we'll fix it, and we'll kind of almost basically develop like a rescue mead essentially, and change it up, or maybe it's changed in the past year and a half, and makes things a little bit easier. So that can happen as well. Cash flow. If cash flow ever gets really tight, improvise. What do I mean by improvise? Flash sales. Hey, you really, there's been some times, actually, I'll get to it in a second, or I'll go a little bit out of order here, where I have mentioned here, package smaller quantities. Well, there's been times where, especially out of the slow period of the year after New Year's until like the spring really starts popping over here, at least in Jersey. It's a real slow time. And, maybe cash is a little tight, not as much revenue coming in over the course of like January through March. And we have a bunch of big tanks to, especially at the batch sizes that we're at, we might need like $12,000. I'm pulling money, numbers out of my head right now, but let's say $15,000 just in packaging costs. Maybe we don't have $15,000 to spare, where we know we've got our loan payment coming out, we've got our rent coming up, we got utility bill coming up, salaries and all that good stuff. Maybe we can't spare 15,000. So you know what? Improvise. We don't have to bottle the entire tank. Let's just bottle what we need right now. And we could afford that. We could afford a third or half as much of the bottles, labels, and corks to get these batches bottled up. Start bringing in that money to be able to afford to just pick up the rest of the equipment and supplies that you need to bottle up the rest in another few weeks. Flash sales are really great. Pre-orders are awesome. So if you have like a new mead that is really on point, and you need some cash coming in to kind of afford other things or carry you from point A to point B, pre-orders are awesome. Especially if it's something that's really marketable. You could do some pre-orders and have basically people prepay you for that mead. It's an awesome way to kind of improvise on being tight on cash flow for whatever reason. So, and then of course, keyboard warriors. So by that, I mean mainly like internet trolls. So yeah, stuff has happened to me, I think on 2 occasions, both of which, not to the extent it deserved, but both of which were initially spurred by comments that I made because I don't know how to keep my big mouth shut most of the time. I've done better since becoming the president of the AMMA, I will say, but there's always going to be trolls. There's always going to be people who don't want to see you succeed or just want to mess with you because they got nothing else to do. And my advice, if that ever happens to you, is figure out how to turn a negative into a positive. Use it to your advantage. Turn the script and use it to your advantage. I had basically, I guess you could call it a cyber attack. I don't even know what to call it. But basically somebody hired out like a bot farm to leave a ton of negative ratings on Melovino's Facebook page about 2 or 3 years ago. And I woke up to a ton, like hundreds of negative 1-star reviews. And I'm thinking, what? We usually get 4 or 5-star reviews. So it was really weird. It was really like, what happened that we got a 1-star review? And then I noticed that it was actually a few hundred of them. And immediately I knew that something was happening. And it wasn't right. So long story short, the very next day, we ended up getting about a few hundred 5-star reviews. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And at first I thought maybe it's the same people that said, we're going to do a second round of negative reviews, and whoever they paid, whatever click farm they paid to do it, misunderstood and was leaving me 5-star reviews by accident. But then I kind of thought, they're probably doing this to make it seem like I hired all of those 5-star reviews through a click farm or something, as like a desperate attempt to kind of restore our rating or something like that. Who knows what the truth was, but all I know is that wasn't on me. But what I decided to do instead was use it to my advantage. I got good press out of it. I got a ton of people coming out of the woodwork, new, old customers, friends, current customers. A ton of people came out of the woodwork and left legitimate, awesome ratings and actual written reviews on Melovino. And we got a ton of exposure in the biggest newspaper in New Jersey, and some blog posts. I mean, turn it into a positive. So next. Sergio gonna be fine. If you guys have ever seen Get Him to the Greek, I thought it was hilarious that P. Diddy's name is Sergio in that movie. Awesome movie. Pivotal moments. For sure, offering club memberships. That is one of the biggest pivotal moments for that Melovino ever had. Distribution was probably the second one. We took a little while. I'll get into this in a little bit as well. We took a while to feel comfortable with starting distribution. We really wanted to kind of get our things together in a few different departments, basically, before we considered distribution. But that was a game changer for us because obviously it equated to more revenue stream, right? Obviously wholesale amount, but not as much as retail, but still more revenue stream that we wouldn't have made otherwise. Cross-flow filtration was another big pivotal moment for us. I'll get into that a little bit more too in a little bit. But that was a huge pivotal moment for us when we started cross-flow filtration. Offering session meads, which was something that, when I first started making mead at home, I had never made a session mead. In fact, I had never repeated the same mead twice until the day that I filled my tanks at the meadery for the first time ever. That was the first time I ever repeated a batch of mead. Call me crazy, but you could also have called me super passionate and super ambitious and super dedicated to making sure that all of this worked. And I would do whatever it took to make it work. But the point of that is I never, ever had session meads on the back of my mind, even forget to have ever made any. When we started offering session meads, it was a big game changer for us. So we went from just making, standard strength meads to then offering session meads and side by side with those. Some meaderies only do standard strength, some only do session. Some, especially the newer meaderies, have kind of learned to offer both. Might be a good business plan, which I very highly agree with. But offering session meads was huge for us. And then when we switched from our initial operation of doing just tours and tastings by reservation only to opening what we just called the mead bar operation, that was a huge difference for us too. I don't regret doing what we did, but making that transition was huge. And again, more on this in a bit. The picture on the right was actually taken by I believe it was New York Times. The New York Times writer was actually in the tasting room at that time, and I was really happy that we had a packed house, a young, diverse crowd, and everybody was really all into it during the tour. We did like fully guided tours and tastings, from like an hour and a half long presentation and tasting altogether, fully guided every step of the way. So I was really happy that we had a really great crowd that day, and we got an awesome article out of it as well. So from my blog post 20 months into opening a meadery, I don't think we could have built our brand or accomplished what we have if we essentially ran a mead bar from day one. We had a brand and a message to get out there, and the way we broadcasted it out there worked. What do I mean by that? Again, like I just mentioned, we only did tours and tastings by reservation when we first opened up, and we did that for the first like 2 years. Maybe about 2.5 years or 3. I don't know. I'm really bad with years. Don't quote me on this. It might have been 3, maybe. I don't know. So we went from that, and we did that for a very specific reason. Maybe let me skip around here. Oh, hold on. All right, maybe not. So we did that for a very specific reason, because number one, there was no other meaderies in New Jersey. So nobody really knew what mead was. If they did, obviously it was Ren Fair or what the Vikings drank, type of thing. So we wanted to get a message out there. We wanted to fully control the experience that every person that stepped into our meadery had. So that included giving them the backstory to what mead is, to how we got how I got started making mead, to how I all the challenges and that I had to face to open up New Jersey's first meadery, which is a really great story if you have the time. To after we open the meadery and how we make mead, and then we take them into the production area and show them all the tanks and all the barrels and explain how we make mead, all the types of honey and this and that, and all the different recipes that we're currently working on, and stuff that we have planned to come out in the future, and answering any questions that anybody had. And then by that point, what happened was people already, and I think I'm jumping ahead of myself here for another slide, but people at that point, before they even taste one of our meads, already fell in love with us and already fell in love with the idea of the business. By the time they get their first glass and take their first sip, they're already set up to absolutely be totally committed into loving it. And that was a huge part, I think, of building our brand, expanding on mead awareness within our state. If your state already has a good mead awareness, at least within your local, immediate local area, maybe it could be improved on. But it was a huge advantage for us to be able to do that. And that's what we did for the better part of, well, if this blog post was from 20 months in, so I guess we did it for about 2 years. We did 2 years of that before we decided, you know what? I think we've gotten as many people as we could have in for just a tour and tasting. Time to open up bar. A little bit on club memberships. The picture on the right over here is a picture of, believe it or not, only half of all of the club orders that we normally ship out. And we even learned to save space and double stack all the boxes just to save some space. And then we would have to throw these all on pallets, put them by the loading dock, and do this all over again, double stack like this, taking up our whole production area. Club memberships are not only a consistent revenue stream, but it's a revenue stream. It's money that you might not have made otherwise. You know, you could open up shop or get a Vino Shipper account, have a tasting room, a retail room, what have you. You're going to get the business that you're going to get. But if you have a club membership, you're pretty much almost guaranteed, like if you do a quarterly club, you're pretty much guaranteed a huge influx of cash every quarter that you can count on. It's consistent based on the numbers of members that you have, obviously. So it is a consistent revenue stream that we probably wouldn't have otherwise have made. It helped finance our growth big time, big time. There's a reason why we ended up getting these 3,000 and 4,000 liter tanks and the automated bottling line and labeler and all the other equipment that we got, and having to get a much larger glycol system to temperature control, all that extra capacity. Geez, I mean, you name it. Club memberships financed all of that growth. Um, it also provides you a really loyal fan base, right? Those club members are even more kind of committed, more into your brand and what you release. Club members purchase more because they get at least what we offer. We offer a 15% discount to our club members and a 18% case discount. So club members, because they know they have that discount, they're much more likely to return to your online store or to the meadery itself and actually purchase more than they might have otherwise purchased, just because they know they're getting that discount that other non-club members are not getting. And just to kind of like give you an idea, especially just looking at the picture here on the right of all these club orders, and mind you, these are just shipping orders. We also had a few hundred just pickup orders that we obviously don't package. We just pick and pack when they walk in to actually to come and pick up their club order. These are just shipping orders. We've had at our highest about 550, 560 club members at our highest point. And normally, lately, we kind of hover around like the I would actually say like the 380 to like 400 mark, because you always have new club members signing up, some that have been, club members for long enough and for financial or moving away or any other reason, they end up canceling their club membership, which is totally fine. But we always kind of have new members signing up as others drop off. So we kind of hover around like 380 to around 400 club members normally, which is great. As when I mentioned here, new club format. So we've experimented a lot with our clubs and how we run our club memberships. So from the beginning, for years, we basically only offered kind of like a pre-chosen default, like meadery selected package. Like these are the 4 bottles, or because we have a 4-bottle club option and a 6-bottle club option. So we would already decide like these are the 4 bottles every club member is going to get, and these are the 6 bottles that our 6-bottle club members are all going to get, and every box is the same. That's when the picture here on the right made a lot of sense, because we would just line up boxes, have them ready to just drop bottles into, and we would just run a cart down all these aisles, just dropping the bottles into every single box. And because we knew that every single box was 100% identical. We would do all the 6-bottle club orders first, and then we would package all the 4-bottle club orders. And we would every box was 100% identical, and we could print out all of our labels, and it doesn't matter what box we slap our shipping labels on. It doesn't matter, because every box is exactly the same. Piece of cake. Took time, a lot of effort, building the boxes, printing labels, filling the boxes, closing the boxes, all that fun stuff. Take a whole like day or two if you're really good at it, at least at this volume. But totally worth it. So what we then started doing was we decided to offer, and I was really reluctant to do this, but I kind of felt like it was going to be more beneficial, because I think we would get more members, and I was right. We would get more club members signing up, and I think even the existing club members would love the change as well. Was we went from a pre-selected club order to a pick your own. So basically, we're giving the opportunity for our club members to literally make any changes to their bottle selections. And that did quite a few things. Number one, made our current club members extremely happy. Most of them were ecstatic that they got to pick what bottles they went in and customize their club order. We would have some minimums and maximums here and there for certain ones, depending on inventory on hand. Yeah, so there might have been like 1 bottle that you have to get, certain bottles you can't get more than 2 of, so on and so forth. So luckily our software system is able to kind of manage all that very easily. So we kind of had a whole protocol set in place and really thought this through before we implemented this. But our club members loved it. And what we do is we set a default bottle selection So that way, even giving them 2 weeks lead time to pick their bottles, if they don't, then they just basically get you that default bottle selection that we choose. Some people just leave it alone and they'll just accept that default selection that we chose, or some people just don't even have, just forget or just totally missed it and don't make that change and they get that default selection. Good thing for us is the more default selections, the easier it is for us to package it all up, because those are all the same bottles into the boxes. So the biggest problem with the pick your own is this. This is our last process from our last pick your own club order. This spans the entire first floor of our meadery. I'll play this video. It's I think it's only about 15 or 30 seconds. So hopefully this plays here. So this is what we have to do now. Take a second. Not over yet. So that's what we have to do now. Instead of just neatly piling up boxes and every box being the same, we're individually picking every single order that at least is not a default club selection order. So it is insane. So what went from a at least getting shipping orders ready, for club orders, what was, excuse me, I'm like not able to talk right now. What used to take a day or two for us to get all shipping orders put together and ready to pick up, now takes about a week, just because of just the sheer number of shipping orders that we have, and every single one of them has to be individually picked. So it's pretty insane. But again, the advantage to that is, and I'm going to go back to this slide. The advantage to that is, before, when we had our default club selection that we picked, it was a flat fee for our club orders. What we did was, once we changed it to our pick your own option, it is our club membership, our club order cost went from a set flat amount to retail value of the bottles that the customer chooses minus 20% for a club order discount. So what ended up happening was, not only did we make more money, and all dependent on the selection that the customer makes, but almost every single club order increased in value, because it's no longer just a flat fee. It's whatever that retail bottle cost of your selection is minus 20% off for that club order discount. It was more revenue per order. At the same time, customers were super happy and super ecstatic that they got to pick their own bottles. So it was like a huge win-win, except for those of us who actually have to go to the trouble of picking and packing all those customized orders, of course. But again, totally worth it. Totally worth the time, the effort, and the work involved. Another great thing about that is, we don't necessarily have to always come out with new products to put into those club orders every single quarter. That was a huge downfall for us. So the success of our club membership was amazing, and a huge reason for the success of our business. However, it was one of the biggest crutches that we had in our production, because how are you supposed to come out with new meads and have them filtered and bottled in, every 3 months, when, a mead can take, depending on the batch, maybe 2 to 4 months, depending on the mead. I mean, it was such a burden to kind of keep up with the responsibility, if you would, of having to have something new, at least 2 or 3 at least new bottles, new meads every single quarter, to kind of keep those club members happy. And also, meanwhile, trying to also keep tanks open for large batches that we need for distribution. It was really challenging to do that. And this pick your own club option was a huge godsend for for that as well, because now, like I said, we don't necessarily have to have something new. It's just, hey, you get 20% off of any 4 bottles or more. And that was the other thing. Club members got, with this pick your own option, got to also select more than just their minimum 4 bottles or minimum 6 bottles. 6-bottle club members got like a larger selection of bottles to choose from and had like less limitations on quantities. The 4-bottle club members kind of got a little bit less selection and only 1 mead per, per selection kind of a thing, 1 bottle per mead. So we had like your pros and cons, so club members could decide which one they'd rather be in. But anyway, it was just a huge difference for us. And although a lot more work and a lot more to keep on top of, and a lot more room for error as well, because picking all those individual orders is quite demanding and requires some keen focus there. The last thing on club memberships, I spent a good amount of time on this because I think it's so important for a meadery to have a club membership and the software to do it, whether it's a winery specific software or Vino Shipper. I mean, honestly, Vino Shipper, it seems to have a really great club module within their system too. So highly recommend that as well. The new club format, this is the last thing I'll touch upon as far as club memberships go. The new club format that we're going to start, well, we were going to start experimenting with it in 2020, but 2020 happened. And then I was home for a few months when the kids' schools closed, and then everything else. Obviously, I don't have to get into it. I almost kind of feel like we can't even complain about anything because everybody's going through the same thing. So we might as well just shut up. But the one new thing that we were going to try for club memberships was a whole new club format, which has really been gaining some traction in the wine world. And I keep a real close eye on what's going on in the wine world because they come up with some good ideas here and there. But it is offering more of a subscription model. And what I mean by that is, think of like your, like if you have like one of those meal plan delivery services, like what is it, Blue Apron, or maybe you're a Dollar Shave Club member, that you can basically sign up for a subscription, get automatic deliveries in the intervals that you want. So maybe you want mead delivered to 4 bottles every month, or 6 bottles every 6 months, or 2 bottles a month, or a bottle a week, whatever it is. We're going to experiment with actually implementing more of a customized, well, I'll say rather personalized subscription model for our club memberships. And we're going to experiment with this because some wineries have had a huge success with this and customers love this. I mean, you can pick the bottles that you want. You can customize how many bottles you get within however much, whatever time frame you want, time intervals you want. You also get to cancel or pause your subscriptions whenever you want. So giving the customer like full control over their club membership is huge, I think. I think there's huge advantages. And I think with all of those, it's a lower barrier entry for new customers to entertain the idea of joining a club like that, rather than something else that might require more of a commitment. That maybe they're like really, maybe they got a good buzz going on and they know it, and they're really, really all into this mead thing, and Mellow Vino is awesome because we just drank like 2 bottles worth of mead and we're going to sign up for a club. And then, a month or 3 months later, they might say, you know what, maybe, I don't know if we're going to drink all of this mead. It happens, right? You're in the moment, impulse purchase kind of a thing. But with this, so a lot of people might not be into like really committing to like certain stipulations that certain club memberships require. But this totally personalized, managed by them clubs, personalized subscription club model, I think is really attractive to get a ton of new customers. And also it's going to eliminate all of this bulk packaging. Because what if all of your club members now, instead of every club member receiving their club order at the same exact time, Now, what if they're all spread out and maybe all you need to put together is maybe 3 or 4 club orders a day or a week, you know, because if everybody's spread out over the course of the year and not all at once, you know, it can actually make things a lot easier as far as just the packaging side of it goes. So that's one thing that we're going to be experimenting with. So as far as club memberships, that's all I got to say about that. We saw this crazy video. Cross-flow filtration. I'll go through this relatively quick here. What are we, an hour in? Okay. Oh, well. All right. So I'll try to breeze through some of this. Not too much left here. So time and money saved. 1 day of filtration versus an entire week of filtration of step filtering down with like plate and frame or even lenticular. There's no filter media inventory for you to keep on hand. All those filter pads or filter modules, you don't need to keep a bunch of them on hand at all time or store them, especially for lenticular. It's a huge pain in the butt to store lenticular modules. There's way less product loss, and eventually it pays for itself. Obviously, you've got to be at a certain production size to kind of to have it worth it to get that return on investment. And it all depends really, because somebody's going to put this question in the chat, and I'm not going to have a direct answer for it. The question is going to be, at what production size would it make sense to get a crossflow? It really all depends on how quick you want to get a return on investment. And also obviously how much you produce a year. So it depends is the best answer. But here's a perfect example of a 1,000 liter batch. Well, out of a 1,000 liter tank, 275 gallon batch. If you were to step filter this thing down, let's say you're not doing any clarification agents, you're saying no clarifying agents, we're just gonna filter it down to 0.45 and bottle it from there. Plate and frame, you're gonna lose about 20%. Out of 275 gallons, that's 55 gallons lost from step filtering everything down, after filtration, down to sterile filtration. With crossflow, you're going to lose maybe roughly 15 gallons, possibly even less. Sometimes 11, 12 gallons is possible, depending on how much suspended solids is really in that mead. So it really depends on what you're making too, but roughly 15 gallon loss. The loss difference in 500 milliliter bottle equivalent, that difference between 15 and 55 gallons is 300 500 milliliter bottles with a retail value at $24 per bottle. That's $7,200 in retail value that you're losing using plate and frame versus crossflow. The cost of a mobile crossflow filtration service, if you have one within your area, their minimum is usually about $2,500. So you can see just from one batch, from one 1,000 liter tank, that the retail value that you're losing, $7,200, just from that one tank, is more than paid for if you just pay $2,500. It sounds like a lot, but totally worth it. Even just if you're filtering just one tank. That's the way I've always seen it. And of course, we normally have like 3,000 to 4,000 something gallons that we're filtering all at once with our mobile crossflow filtration service that we used to hire, at least. The picture on the right, it was the first crossflow filter that I got. It was from, well, I'm not even gonna mention the supplier because honestly, it wasn't even their fault, so there's no reason to mention it. But the type of filter media that this crossflow uses is not really, it doesn't necessarily work for mead, and I still don't know exactly why. I didn't ever put the time or effort into really trying to figure it out. All I knew was what actually worked when this didn't. So this unit unfortunately didn't work for us, and we ended up returning it. We literally just got our new crossflow filtration unit last week, which we're super psyched about. We're literally just waiting for our electrician to come in and kind of plug it all up for us to start using next week. So it's worth it. Even if you can't afford buying one, try to find a mobile crossflow filtration service, and make sure, especially for mead, that they have ceramic membrane modules on their crossflow, not PES or anything else. That's going to be a surefire way to make sure you're not going to have any issues. So, and to be honest, even if you don't have one in your immediate area, know that a lot of them travel. My guy came from Virginia every single time up to New Jersey. Next, distribution. I'll go through this real quick. Don't distribute too early. Get your brand ready. Test your local market in-house. Make sure you got stabilization 100% down packed and no issues with re-fermentation in the bottle. For me, that entailed filtering down to 0.45 and then using absolute cartridge filtration in line with our bottling line to make sure that absolutely no yeast got through right before it went into a bottle. It's filtered 100% efficiency, pretty much. But yeah, don't go and try to get into distribution too early. Really get your shit down together. It's a big leap going from homebrew size batches to larger production size batches. Different equipment and processes and the logistics basically all changes. So get used to that. Make sure your process is on point, and of course stabilization for sure. Core versus rotation nation is a big pet peeve of mine. So mainly we distribute 4 of our meads, 3 main ones. We distribute Midnight Jack, Boku, and Murder of Crows. Those are our 3 core products that we send out to distribution in the 7 states that we distribute to right now. We also have Nicest Pie, or apple pie mead, which we also distribute to all those states, although we only make a 1,000-gallon batch of that once a year, and once it's gone kind of a thing. So it's just kind of like our seasonal, essentially. So some distributors want different things or styles. So going back to the core versus rotation nation, even breweries fall under the same predicament where, long are the days where you could just have a core lineup of beers or, even mead and expect repeat customers, repeat business all the time. Every consumers just wants whatever's new, what's different, what's new. I've tasted all that stuff. Great. It was awesome. What's new? That's rotation nation. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, but at the same time, I actually love experimenting and constantly making new and different meads, especially on the session mead side, because it's so much quicker turnaround. It's really, really really awesome for me, experimenting, but it does kind of get on my nerves how people just automatically demand it. And I think it's a lot worse in the brewery world, actually, but still, it exists in the mead world. You want those customers to come back more often, make more different meads. Some distributors want different things and styles. Perfect example, for whatever reason, Michigan consumers are not into apple pie meads. For whatever reason, they're just not into it. They love everything else. The big mellow obviously, obviously they love those, but for whatever reason, an apple pie mead, and I've heard this from my distributor out there and even a sales rep from a different distributor, they all say for whatever reason, apple pie meads don't move as well as everything else in Michigan. Maybe it's because they're just surrounded by a lot of great apples and ciders and all that other stuff. Maybe, I don't know, whatever. For whatever reason, apple pie meads don't work that great in Michigan. So you have to kind of learn kind of like each different, not even distributors want something different. It's just the state, the consumers within different regions might want something different. So kind of keep that in mind. And also, if you're kind of thinking, let's say I'm in New Jersey, so I'm thinking, well, it's the middle of January. We're not going to release a mango mead, session mead. Well, it's not cold in San Diego. It's not cold in Florida. Those states might still want those and be totally fine with getting a passion fruit guava mead or whatever. Even though nobody wearing a North Face over here in Jersey is going to be interested in anything tropical right now. Keep that in mind as well. The 50% rule is pretty simple. One of the biggest questions I always had before getting into distribution, and one of the questions I get asked the most by others looking to get into distribution is, how much do I charge for wholesale? I use the 50% rule, which is basically whatever you want your mead to retail at on the shelf at a liquor store, you basically charge about 50% of that price to your distributor. The distributor marks it up, usually at least 30% margin, not percentage, 30% margin on top of your price to them. And then obviously the retailers can mark it up. Different states, they use different systems, but usually you're going to get to about that bottle price. What I normally do is I go the 50% rule and add $1. And that's actually gotten all of my bottles in almost every state exactly where I want them to be. Not ridiculously cheap, like there's some like, discount meads, but my meads are also not crazy expensive compared to others as well. We do that purposely just to make it more accessible to the broader audience, but that's what we usually do. 50% plus $1 per bottle. And that also ensures, hey, we're making more money. We're sending thousands and thousands of bottles out for distribution. That extra $1 adds up, and doesn't really affect, doesn't take our bottle prices soaring on the retail shelves everywhere. And as far as when you get into distribution, one thing I've noticed, and even across even with the big breweries that I've spoken with locally and out of state, that get into big distribution out of state, they've always noticed this. They all notice the same thing. Your distribution sales normally plateau in up to about a year and a half. So it's going to take a while for the distributors to really start saturating the market in their state or their immediate area. And then obviously, once you kind of fill all the shelves that you could possibly fill and get into menus at bars and restaurants, eventually you're going to reach a saturation point. And your sales there are then going to depend, your repeat sales are going to depend on product flow. It's really easy to put a bottle of mead on the shelf. It's a whole different thing to get it off of that shelf, right? So after a year and a half, you kind of get to a point of saturation. And I kind of feel at that point, I don't feel at that point, what happens is your repeat orders for that distributor to that state slows down. So they might be ordering a pallet every 2 or 3 months, but eventually they might only order like 1 or 2 pallets a year. Because, hey, I mean, now they're at the mercy of, waiting for all of those accounts to move those bottles off the shelf enough to make room for a new order to reorder. So you're going to reach that point of saturation, like I said, and then you'll plateau for a little while. And then that's where you kind of are normally set at, unless you take some additional initiatives or hire some sales reps or take additional measures to push your product even more and do something else other than just relying on customers to grab bottles off of shelves on their own, to push your product to possibly move more product and sell more mead to the distributor. But there's questions as far as return on investment, how much money you spending to do that versus how much money is it actually bringing you in. So there's a lot to go into as far as that goes, but I think that could be a whole other presentation, taking a deep dive into that. From 4 months after I opened my meadery, this is a snippet of one of the things I posted. I don't think there's any craft beverage out there as versatile as mead, which plays to our advantage in knowing that not everyone is going to like every mead you make. But if you give them options, they will find something they truly love. I believe there is a mead for everyone. This is still so very true. I totally believe this still. If we open their doors with 5 meads, if all we did were release just those 5 meads over and over and over, and everybody we could have possibly gotten into the meadery has tasted all 5 of those, and one of those meads wasn't for them, then we probably lost a really good customer and a lot of money, a lot of potential sales. So giving them more options not only gives them more chance to find something that they really love, and but it also opens up the door for you to find your new best sellers, right? So if I started off with those first 5 meads and never made anything else, I never would have released Midnight Jack. I never would have released Murder of Crows or Nicest Pie or some of the other really awesome meads that we've done that are huge, huge sellers. I never would have made them, period. So I never would have known you're never going to know what your new biggest best seller is going to be, essentially, if you don't offer options. And the more options you offer them, the more likely they are to find something they really love and be a repeat customer. Draft mead. Funny story, this little wooden figurine, this is like one of those things you buy when you're like in art school. When I was in school for visual communications, I picked up one of these to practice my sketching and all that. So I've had this for, like 20 years. it's been with us since day one at the meadery. For whatever reason, I decided to bring it in while we were still setting up the meadery in the space, and it's been with us ever since. We've even dressed them up with I 3D printed him like a baseball cap, it's the sunglasses. We put a gold chain on him. We dress him up in like sombrero and a poncho for like not Mardi Gras, Cinco de Mayo and stuff. So we dress him up even sometimes. We have a lot of fun with this guy, but we never really make it a big thing. So I wonder how many people have actually really noticed that this guy has been with us since day one. Offering session meads. It started with me when we had all these spare ingredients, like a gallon of fruit concentrate left over, like 8 pounds of honey of this varietal or not, or whatever. And we're just like, let's get rid of these buckets, but I don't want to pour anything down the drain. And we just started making some session meads. We offered them to our customers here and there on the side. We weren't really selling them. They loved them so much, they basically demanded that we make more. And little by little, we obviously did that. We focused on that. Now we currently have 8 taps that rotate almost on a weekly basis, and are about to go really big into draft mead, session mead distribution now too. Quicker turnaround time, everybody knows that, as well as lower cost and price point. It's an easier, lower barrier entry for people to try mead for the first time. If they could buy like a $4 to $6, 12 or 16 ounce can of session mead, or a pour of it, rather than a $20 to $30 bottle of standard strength mead. More options in house. So a little bit more than half of our weekly sales in the tasting room are from session meads. That includes cans that we can in house. We'll can right off. I think we correct me if I'm wrong out there. Maybe somebody knows this, but I think we might have been, not that I'm bragging, but I think we might have been the first meadery to actually have like a crowler machine to can on demand in the tasting room. I can't remember if anybody else ever did that, but all I know is obviously breweries have done that for years. And I said, why don't we do that for mead and do it like in the tasting room itself? But anyway, it was the best return on investment we ever got buying that crowler machine. It was paid off within like less than a month, I think. The amount of cans that we sold, and we normally move through probably like 300 to 350 cans a week at least, on a weekly basis. Maybe a little bit less right now, depending on the weekend, because obviously COVID. But a little bit more than half of our weekly sales come from draft meads, whether they're poured in our flights. No, I'm sorry. This is strictly based off of cans that we sell, and full pours of session meads. More than half of our sales comes from that. So the interesting thing is, if we didn't have session meads, we would still be making an okay amount of money as far as sales go on a weekly basis in the tasting room. But we're not making less money than we used to on our standard strength stuff. And the session mead stuff isn't necessarily making a whole lot more than our standard strength stuff. So for me, it's almost like, it's just like found money. If you're not making session meads, I think you're losing money. I mean, at least as far as having session meads alongside standard strength meads. Having one or the other is not going to bring you in the same amount of weekly sales, but having both, I think, almost kind of doubles our weekly sales. And of course, I mean, people could go through a few pours of session meads in house. How many glasses is somebody going to go through of like 14% alcohol stuff? They know most customers kind of try to hold themselves back a little bit, at least, most of the time. And crowler sales galore. We sell a ton of crowlers. We do 12 ounce. We started with 16 ounce cans. But we ran some numbers, and I think we sell more 12 ounce cans for $1 less than our 16s. And there's way higher profit margin as well on the 12 ounce cans based upon our pricing, at least. Mead bar operation. I think I covered a lot of this already, so I'm going to kind of skip this, but pretty much. I'm going to skip most of this. I did touch upon each and every one of these at one point or another. So you can look back to this if you want when everything is ready for download. So this is one of my most favorite quotes. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's so true. No matter how much you plan, sometimes I tell people like, you need to put a business plan together to get a loan. Great. As soon as you get that loan, just throw that business plan in the garbage, because everything is going to change. I don't care how well you plan things out. Things are going to change. So expect that, essentially. I've learned along the way. I mean, there was a few, like I mentioned before, pivotal moments that if we didn't change, I honestly do think Melovino could have possibly gone out of business probably at two different points in time. If we hadn't had enough forethought to kind of see certain things coming and think ahead enough, and didn't adapt when we did, or the way we did even, there was a good chance I could have possibly been out of business, or just had to run the place on my own part-time, whatever the case is. I probably still would have figured out a way to make it work and survive, but it would have been a lot more difficult and a lot more stress as far as that goes. But keep some forethought. Try to plan ahead, think ahead, especially in times like this. Try to think ahead. I'm thinking ahead. What's going to happen during the winter in the Northeast that we're going to get over the course of December, January, and February? That's where my head has been at 3 months ago, planning on that. Not November 11th, trying to think about what I'm going to do starting next month. Keep thinking ahead. This sums me up like 100%. Dissatisfaction is a symptom of ambition. It is the coal that fuels the fire. This is from Mad Men. This is totally me. I'm not that I'm usually dissatisfied. It's just I'm always looking to improve things constantly. So it's that ambition that kind of really does fuel my fire. Because I'm not that I'm never happy, but I always feel like I could always do a little bit better, and that's like a really great mindset to have. I've won gold medals for Meads at multiple competitions, including Mazer Cup, that I said, I think I could actually improve this. Or anything that we do in house, or any process, even something just process related. I'm always like looking for a better way, or some way to improve something. And it's one of the best traits for somebody, especially in this kind of a business, to have, because eventually you're going to keep fine tuning things to the point where people are like, it's fine, it's perfect. It's like, stop changing it. And you'll still be a little dissatisfied. But might be able to get used to that. I wish I could find this image large in a good enough resolution to have it printed and framed up everywhere in my house at the meadery. This is Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl's guitar after practice. You got to give it your all. You really do. Opening a meadery is not an easy task. Making and selling something that most people have still never heard of for a relatively high price, just solely because of the cost of honey, is not the easiest business to get into. And the more higher end you are in this niche of a market, is even more difficult, especially during times like these that we're going through. But put your all into it. It's this is what this image always reminds me of. And sometimes it comes up in my Facebook memories, and every time I see it, I reshare it to make sure I keep seeing this randomly throughout my years. Because every time I see this, it's as bloody, as big of a bloody mess this is on a white guitar. It just always reminds me of, like, just give it your all, in everything, in every little detail. Just give it your all. What's next? Especially during COVID, boy, I mean, we have a few things different planned, at least two of which I can't really get into too many details, because we're gonna kind of try to keep it on the wraps until we actually have it launched. One of them will be launched next month, probably by middle of December. But I think we're gonna get into the hard cider game. I think I would have gotten into it a lot sooner. People are thinking, you haven't made cider yet. State laws here prevented that, and yada yada yada. Long story. We can start making hard cider now. That's a very long story short. So that's one of the reasons why we never really did. But I think, yeah, we're going to get into the cider game. And I put some thought into it also. And Mellow Vino doesn't seem like a name that really coincides with cider. Mead, yes. There's a reason. It goes with mead. It's Latin based for honey and wine. But you know, Latin based honey wine name for a apple cider product doesn't really go hand in hand. So we're looking to make some hard cider products under a completely different brand name, which is really cool. It's awesome. It's also it's got a fun little play on it too that I think people are going to have fun with. And we're really going to look into making like really cool, like think of it like a really creative craft brewery meets cidery, like that type of crazy off the wall hard ciders of really interesting flavor combinations, different stuff, a lot of experimental cider. And if it gets big enough where we can focus on really building that brand on its own and distribute that, and then we'll get to that point. But we're going to start having fun with it, and that's going to be our next step, offering a whole other category of beverage. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm hoping that it kind of just continues to add on to our eventually our weekly sales in house, where, like I said, session meads and standard strength meads in our tasting room, neither one took sales away from the other. I'm kind of hoping hard cider is going to step in and provide that, you create that triforce, if you will, of fermented beverage styles in house for us. So I think that's what's next for Mellow Vino. We're gonna hopefully, once we kind of get past this little dark ages that we're living in right now with the pandemic, we're hoping to kind of build up some more states for distribution, which we had planned for this year. We were going to pick up 2 more states this year, but that obviously got put on hold. But we're just going to keep getting better and a little bigger. We'll see how big, but that's pretty much what's going to be next for us, I think. And looking back over the past 6 years, a lot of lessons learned. I try to share a lot in this presentation. I hope I kind of got a lot of, made this a content-rich presentation for you guys. It kind of opened up the doors to everything that's kind of gone on and what I've experienced running a meadery for 6 years. I mean, hell, I'm not the only one to learn from. That's for sure. There's plenty of people that have done it way bigger for way longer and even better than I have. That's for sure. But I have always tried to be as honest and as open as possible with all the mistakes that I've made, because I like learning from other people's mistakes. So I want you to learn from mine. I prefer learning from other people's mistakes, actually. So hopefully this all helps you guys and helps you find or decide whether or not to even open up a meadery. But hopefully if you do, this kind of gives you enough insight to like have quite a bit of information to kind of chew on and some things to consider, if you will. So last but not least, balancing work and family. This was a huge thing for me when I first started Mellow Vino. I was here 7 days a week. And when I started the process, my wife here, that's her on the left, her name's Tanya. That was her pouring at one of the last beer fests we poured at, actually about this time last year, November, October last year. I had her finally come out with me. I'm like, why don't you come and actually pour with me at this beer festival? She's never been to a beer festival, never really been kind of like around anything that I've done like that. And she had a ton of fun, as you can see. She had a really good time. And, we got to spend some quality time together where normally I'd be gone the whole day. We spent the whole day together instead. So that was a lot of fun. She's not really involved in the business. She's got her full-time job. We've got her 2 kids. When I started Mellow Vino, she was pregnant with our firstborn, Liam, on the left there in the bottom right picture, who's now 7 years old, actually. And I was at the meadery 7 days a week, almost like as soon as I woke up, I was out the door. Even after he was born, it was what was really demanded. I mean, I stepped in and did whatever I could, obviously, but it was really difficult to balance work and family, especially when you're first building a meadery. And then we had our second son, Lennon, who's on the bottom right there. Well, they're both troublemakers, but he's the wild one, especially. So over the years, I basically made sure that little by little, I was setting things up at the meadery to be able to take small steps, more and more, as time went on, away from certain responsibilities and time commitments at the meadery to make sure that I was home more often to help out with the kids and just overall just spend time with the family. Um, I even lost touch with a lot of friends that I hung out with all the time. I started opening the meadery. I kept saying, no, I can't make it. No, I can't make it. Eventually they stopped inviting you out to poker night and nights out and restaurants and all that good stuff. It's like, no, I gotta work. It's kind of my business. If I don't work, I go out of business. So it's a really big time commitment, and balancing that work and family life can be really challenging, especially in the beginning. So I did my best now. I work Monday to Friday. Besides Wednesdays is my late night at the meadery, and I normally leave the meadery at sometimes 2, 3 in the morning. There's been nights that I literally just work throughout the night, and I drive straight home at 6 in the morning, get the kids ready, drop them off at school and daycare, and come right back to work when they're asleep. But that's my night, so I make the most of it whenever I need to. So whatever you need to do to kind of find that balance is super important, I believe. Another picture of my kids. Like I said, the one on the right, Lennon, he's the troublemaker. We got that helmet on him just to make sure he's fine. This is a picture. This is what happens when I am watching the kids by myself, by the way. So with that said, any questions? Oh, here's our guy again. All right, so I'm going to try to figure out how to minimize the share screen because I lost my cursor. Oh, here we go. Oh, never mind. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to try to go back. I wasn't paying too much attention to the chat here, and sorry for. Are we over time? It's an hour and a half. Yeah, kind of. Not too much. We have nobody after me, so. With that said, let me try to get through some of these questions. When is the next Mead Made Right episode? I think I answered that. I'm going to try to get it started back up after Thanksgiving. If not, the week after the Wednesday night after Thanksgiving, the weekend after. Depends if we have some production work, but I have to try to get a ton of mead bottled by early December. So I'm not sure exactly because, like I said, Wednesday is my late night. So if we have to bottle, I have to put that off. But very soon. Let's say the latest after the new year for sure. What is the name of your favorite winery software? The one I'm using right now, Commerce 7. Very long story short, the first software that I used was written by a guy called Andrew Camphis. It was eWinery Solutions. He sold it off and went elsewhere. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He worked for eWinery Solutions, I believe. I might be getting this wrong. eWinery Solutions, the first software we used, it was awesome for what it was during that time. Excuse me. Andrew Camphis started working for a company. Oh, he actually started Vin65, which we ended up switching to after some problems with eWinery. And we immediately noticed a big difference, a lot of awesome changes. He eventually sold Vin65 to Wine Direct, which was some improvements were made, some things were changed. But overall, I still wasn't fully satisfied. Like I said, dissatisfaction is the whatever of ambition. Basically, he ended up starting his own thing, and Commerce 7. And basically, this thing is like the future of wine software, I think. He is so forward thinking. He built the entire system to be open platform, open source for anybody to really build any integration with the software whatsoever. So there's integrations with MailChimp and ShipStation and Shippo and Ship Compliant and you name it. There's a bunch. Any software company can basically build an app to function with their software. It's incredible. And like I said, they're in the forefront of thinking of introducing new methods and ways of doing things from different industries and implementing it into the wine industry. Kind of like that club subscription model, that personalized subscription model. That was their idea. Nobody else has been doing that. He's the one who kind of started that whole trend. So I highly recommend Commerce 7. I could go on and on about that software, but we don't have that time. What feature does VinTrace include? Does anyone here use Amphora? I remember looking into Amphora. VinTrace I'm not too familiar with, but I believe I looked into that. They're kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of like old school. I definitely wanted something a little bit more modern. To just personal preference is really all it is. But if it works, it works. Would variable volume fermenters be good to start with and brew small in them until you can use all the capacity? Yeah, pretty much. So the key thing to note on variable capacity tanks is obviously you have the lid that could kind of go up and down with inside of the walls of the tank. Honestly, I don't know any meadery that has them that actually uses it for that purpose. But yeah, you can half fill the tank. For example, but you have to fill it up to a certain level because number one, obviously you normally you want it to at least be above the sample valve, number one. If you ever want to pull a sample rather than opening up the racking port or the drain port on the tank, it's a little more difficult to kind of get samples out of that, especially if you just want to get a sample into a glass. At least have it over the sample port, but especially if you're going to have your tank's temperature controlled in any way, you got to have the liquid level over the thermometer port. So you're going to have it at least filled a certain amount. Also keep in mind, depending on the height or let's say the overall coverage of your glycol jacket on the tank, if you get glycol jacketed tanks, if you only have like a little bit of a band in the middle of the tank and you're filling up the tank to below where the glycol jacket starts at the bottom of it, you're really not going to get any cooling efficiency in that tank. So you have to keep that in mind as well. I always recommend try to get as much coverage glycol jackets on your tanks as possible. Let's say Jonathan Hull asks, club sales stay strong even through COVID-19. They do. Actually, what we did was we did a regular club order back in March, like we normally do on schedule. Our the following club order after that, what we did was, because we didn't know what everybody's individual situation was, we made it a voluntary club order, which, not to get into all the details, we just made it voluntary. So if you wanted to receive a club order, you could. If you didn't have to. You weren't forced to take a club order like you would normally otherwise, unless you canceled. So we made it voluntary. Now we're actually about to, we normally do 4 club orders a year. We're only doing 3 this year, and we're about to do our next one in December. And that's going to be a regular club order now. Do you keep your club open all the time, or is there a sign-up window? No, we keep it open all the time. I'm not trying to limit how many club members we have. I mean, honestly, at one point we were about to cap it off when we got over 550 club members. And it got to the point where we're like, there's no way that we could keep coming out with new stuff every single quarter, expectedly. And for that many club members, like our 300-gallon batch sizes, for example, were, maybe we got like 60, 65 gallons out of that. What is that in let's say 65 gallons, roughly like 480 bottles. Well, that right there, any batch that came out of our 300-liter tanks or around that batch size, we didn't even have enough for every club member to get 1 bottle of that. So at one point we considered it, but it ended up kind of coming down. Like I said, we kind of fluctuate around that 380, 400 mark. So we never had the need to, but that's it's all based on your production capacity, right? Depends on how much you could produce for every club member to at least get 1 bottle or have the option to get it at least. Which software are you currently having success with to manage this? Commerce 7. I just mentioned that a little while ago. Yeah, like I said, I can't speak highly enough about it. How do you manage? Perfect example. They also have a reservation system, which we just started using during COVID because we have limited indoor seating. They have their own built-in reservation system, which is kick-ass. It works awesome. And when the customer actually reserves seating for indoor or outdoor seating at our meadery, all of their name, their billing information, and credit card information, even though it's a $0 reservation, they put in their credit card information in case they're a no-show. We charge a $10 per person cancellation fee to deter people from just booking up seats and not showing up, and where we could have had those seats filled, especially being very limited. That's kind of at least our scare tactic. Like, we're not going to charge you anything to reserve, but you better show up. Otherwise, we're charging you. So with that said, we have all of their information, including credit card information. So when they show up to the meadery, all we do is we're able to just pull up their account. They're already in our system, even if they're a first-time customer, never been to the meadery before. So huge plus, and awesome that it's tied in with everything else. That's the biggest thing for me. Having all integrated software is awesome. But anyway, how do you manage your ingredient costs like honey, fruit, yeast, etc.? Do you bulk buy as much as possible, or take out contracts like breweries do for hops? We don't have any contracts with anybody. I don't know anybody in the meat industry, big or small, that has contracts either with even honey suppliers. But just manage my ingredient costs. I mean, we are buying bulk just because of the production scale that we're at. But I literally just buy enough for for our next production run and some. So that way we always have some extra honey to play around with. We always have a little bit more of maybe some hops or certain fruit concentrates or different yeast strains to play around with, and always have something on hand to make something last minute if we need to, especially on the session meat side. I would always order just what I need plus a little extra. That's as far as it goes as far as managing ingredient costs, honestly. We try, again, our space is very small compared to our production size and output. So we try to take up as little amount of space as possible. We don't want to keep a ton of inventory on hand of anything, honestly. So we try to run a very lean, ordering practice, for lack of a better term. Leaf Stevens says, hard for me to put into words how much I love my crossflow. I feel you, man. I know that was a game changer. Jonathan Hull was asking what didn't work, I guess, with the crossflow. Was it sugar level? No, it wasn't necessarily sugar level. I honestly, like I said, I still to this day don't really know exactly what it is. All I know was it wasn't just that particular crossflow model. Our mobile crossflow guy actually came up once with their other crossflow system, which was not a ceramic membrane. And the same thing happened with theirs. It clogged up almost immediately. And it was a nightmare of a day compared to what it normally is. So all I know, it's the filter media type. I honestly, I never put thought or effort into really trying to figure out the details as to why. When did you hire your first employees? Which tasks, positions did you need to fill first? So when did I hire my first employee? I hired my brother, who's helped me out since day one for free for like 2 years. So after about like year one, maybe first year and a half, I hired my brother on full time. I was full time myself already. So I was just there by myself, but you can only get so much done by yourself as well. And especially when you also have to pick up the phone and entertain anybody who walks in through the door and, kick people out that are trying to sell you stuff all the time, yada, yada, yada. But I hired him like a year in, I believe it was. And I just need somebody to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, listen, move all this honey over there, fill up this tank, following this exact recipe on this piece of paper, transfer this and there, move these barrels with the pallet rack somewhere, pallet jack somewhere else, set up these fittings and whatever it is, like all like the little stuff that I just needed somebody else to do. Whatever I needed to do, I just basically chose what was more specialized, and that's what I did. Anything else, I would throw at him. So it was kind of like a jack of all trades type of a thing, to be honest. It was just having a right-hand man, essentially. And that came with a lot of needed education, because my brother never fermented anything in his life. He's never was really into, still kind of isn't into like the craft beer, or, I mean, he's into mead, but he's not like a huge drinker or like obsessive about anything, fermentation wise or just fermented beverage wise necessarily. But he enjoys them, just not like us, put it that way. He's a different breed. He's got his own hobbies for sure, though. So yeah, so it also all depends on who you hire. The more education they have, the more knowledge and passion they have for what you need them to do, the better, obviously. But my brother's done a lot of stuff that somebody who's educated and passionate about mead making or even beer making, he does a bunch of stuff that they could never have done also. So you kind of, you have to find like the right people for you, I guess. How do you, oh, sorry. The other question was, why did you choose Vauxhall, New Jersey? How could a new mazer identify an ideal city or customer base? All right. Number one, a mazer is not somebody who makes mead. A mazer is a cup. I'm going to keep correcting people on that until I die. I used to use that term myself. So I'm even guilty of it until I learned better. But now you know better. A mazer is a cup. It is not someone who makes mead. Why did I choose Vauxhall, New Jersey? Because it was the best place for the cheapest price. That's literally why I chose Vauxhall, New Jersey. It's a small little suburb of a city called Union, which is a big city here in Jersey. I grew up one town over from it, and I never heard of Vauxhall, New Jersey. It's such a small, tiny little suburb. So why did I choose it? Like, again, it was the best place for the cheapest price, and reasonably so, because it's in the back of a strip mall with no signs up front whatsoever, and nobody has any business to drive behind this mall either. So that's probably why it was so cheap. We made it work. We call ourselves like the speakeasy of Jersey, right? So how do you mix and add honey to your tanks? For the longest, we've done, we still buy all of our honey in buckets, believe it or not. We've just gotten so used to it. I honestly don't mind it. If anything, it gives me an excuse to work out every 2 or 3 months. I lift like 8,000 pounds of honey over the course of 2 days. I think that's enough workout for 2 months. So how do we mix it? We open buckets and we pour it into tanks and we circulate water. Once we can't put any more honey into that water, we pump it into the tank, fill up another tote. Now we actually have, we got a new pump that we're able to pump honey. So now we've been basically just using the pump to just with a kind of like a real wide mouth, like racking arm, essentially. We just stick it into the buckets and we just pump all the honey out of buckets. Now we're about to start getting into some drums, but we have to be very careful with only ordering exactly how much we need, because we don't have a set place to just keep drums lying around. So whatever we get in drums, we have to basically use all of it. Otherwise it's just going to be in the way, and a drum full of honey is not an easy thing to move. It's not very convenient. Not as convenient as just moving some buckets around. As a home brewer, I feel like 30 minutes of every hour brewing is spent cleaning, sanitizing. Is it like this in the commercial realm as well? Oh yeah. More than 30 minutes of every hour you are spending cleaning, my friend. Whether it's scrubbing bigger tanks, cleaning, rinsing, sanitizing usually takes almost as much time as just filling tanks. It just like a brewer, a professional brewer will tell you, they are a glorified janitor. That's what a commercial mead maker is, more so than even a home mead maker, I think, because we have so much more. We also have to keep like everything. We have way bigger, like just like the ground, the floor on front of all your tanks in your production area. It's just splatters everywhere. I mean, as a home brewer, you're going to try to contain the mess on your countertop or on a table, or maybe like in a small area of your kitchen floor or basement or something like that. But in the commercial scene, I mean, for lack of a better term, shit gets everywhere. The pump gets dirty. You can have leaks here and there. Every time you take samples out of a sample valve or disconnect a hose from a tank, you're always going to have drippage. Constant fruit fly issues, like all year round almost. You're constantly cleaning and sanitizing constantly. So that is not going to be any different other than possibly just being more so on a commercial level. Do you offer mead bar selections to your club members for shipping? Mead bar selections, like Amy, I don't know. Can you clarify on that? Do you mean draft meads? Let me know. With your session meads, do you see any customer preference on hazy versus clear? Assuming the one in the photo for the session mead style is a session strength one. Yeah, that photo. I don't know if you guys can still see my screen. You should be able to. This was a like a hazy IPA style mead, actually. The reason why I got all that really nice head retention, maltodextrin, by the way. So this is not a traditional mead or anything like. This is a hazy IPA mead. So intentionally hazy. But honestly, for the session meads that we make currently, I'm gonna make sure I emphasize that currently, because all the session meads we make right now, for the most part, is all just for in-house immediate consumption. 1 barrel batches the most, usually. So it's a quick turn and burn, basically, or burn and turn. Is it burn and turn or turn and burn? Whatever it is, you know what I'm saying. So we don't filter any of these meads. Certain ones we do that I want that clarity to. Certain ones happen to be that they're gonna finish clear just on their own, just by design, essentially. And then also, I haven't noticed anybody ever mentioning anything as far as clarity. To be honest, we make it known that these are unfiltered meads meant to drink fresh. We do stabilize them with sulfite and sorbate. However, I don't count on that. And on the on all of our cans that we've ever had, we specifically mention clear as day. Keep refrigerated, drink fresh, just in case. So I don't see any customers having any preference of hazy versus clear. Nobody's ever cringed their nose or mentioned anything that I've noticed, at least. So anyway, so that's that. Did you have experience working in a, where did that question go? Did you have experience working in a brewery environment before starting Melovino, or just home brewing? Did you have to learn how to set up, troubleshoot all that big commercial equipment on the fly? So the first part of the question, did I ever have experience working in a brewing environment? No. I never did anything except for make wine at home. Then I started brewing a ton of beer at home. And then I stumbled across mead on homebrewtalk.com. And then it just started from there, basically. I envisioned mead. I had no idea what mead was, but I saw all these people talking about something mead, and honey, and what the hell are these two? What do these two words have in common? And I learned about mead, and I envisioned this like frothy ale, like honey beer kind of a thing. That you drink out of a stein and slam on the table. I don't know why. That's how I envisioned mead, and I tried making it. It was nothing like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. I want to pay attention to this a little more often. And literally, long story short, figure this out all on my own. All of that commercial equipment, also had to figure that out all on my own. I didn't really have any friends in the brewing industry at that time. I didn't have any winery owner friends either at all. Honestly, I didn't know anybody in the commercial anything business, beverage production related in the state. So all I really had at my disposal was Google, and hoping I could find some other mead maker that's done it before to hopefully answer a question, and hopefully I don't sound like an idiot asking it. So it was all just figuring out everything on the fly. It would have been a lot quicker if we had all the resources that we have today, and all the access to a lot of other people with more experience. That's for sure. FIP. Leaf Stevens is asking FIP. What is FIP? Just refresh my memory. What's FIP? Sorry, it's late and I could actually use another beer. A beer, session mead. I have my session mead cans in front of me, warm, but it was worth it to speak with you guys. Okay, so Amy clarified. Oh yeah, so yeah, Leaf Stevens, FIP, yes. Flex impeller pump. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I totally knew that, but I don't know why I couldn't think of it. Yeah, I'll use a flex impeller pump for everything, really. We have 2 of them now. Always have backups for sure, especially on the pump is the workhorse of your meadery. And Amy Olson clarified, yes, for draft meads and crowlers, do we offer those for shipping? We were at the beginning of this COVID pandemic because the funny story is when I got the news from our governor that all bars, restaurants, drinking places essentially had to close until further notice when all this pandemic started. I remember calling my brother because I was home with the kids already. They had already closed schools. And I called my brother immediately after I read that. And I said, this is insane. We're probably going to be closed for like 2 or 3 weeks. I wish. So our tasting room was completely closed down and I was freaking out because the longer this thing went with the shutdown, I was getting more and more scared. So I said, you know what? Why don't we just try selling our cans online? They're not 100% shelf stable. I would never count on what we currently produce being shelf stable. Everything we're about to send out into distribution is sterile, filtered, stabilized, all that good stuff, shelf stable. But everything we do in-house is not 100%. So, but we decided to ship them out, and we did that for a while. And it made sense. We sold through everything we put out there and all that good stuff. We're probably going to start doing that again over the winter, to be honest, because outdoor seating is going to disappear for us in the Northeast, basically. And we're going to be very limited. We're still going to be limited capacity for indoor seating. So that's going to be one of the things we're going to be doing over the winter months to try to compensate some for, some missing revenue. We'll be selling some more cans online. And we also got some draft. We have like a pallet of 500 milliliter bottles that I've been trying to think of how to get rid of. And we're actually going to do some session meads in those. And we're going to get rid of that pallet that's taking up space here for probably 3 or 4 years, probably 4 years, actually. We'll probably get rid of that pallet. So expect some shelf stable session meads in 500 milliliter bottles coming out soon. And then shortly thereafter, we're going to start doing a bunch of cans, shelf stable cans. Let's see. What's this other question here? The brewery I'm currently making mead at had a fruit fly outbreak over the summer. Took at least a couple of weeks to get it under control. Oh yeah. The best way I've realized is, number one, you got to catch them early, and also the colder you keep everything, like your rooms, the lower, the less the population. They have a harder time, I guess, staying alive in the colder temperature. So we try to keep everything as cool as possible, relative, not relatively, but we try to keep everything as cool as reasonably possible, let's just say. And that helps a lot. If we didn't have our AC on, it would be a freaking ridiculous outbreak. We've noticed that even from one day to the next, changing the temperature on the thermostat of our AC. Yeah, you got to catch them quick and try to keep things cold. That's what we learned. And there is a very specific product that we use that, honestly, we've tried everything from leaving a glass of mead out to using the whole vinegar, fruit fly trap thing. Like, all of those are nonsense compared to what we use. It is like so effective. If anybody's interested, let me know. Message me on Facebook, because I'd have to look it up. I forgot what it's called. I could describe it to you, but I don't want to waste everybody's time doing that here today. Let's see, follow up to Scott's comment. What do you do to manage fruit flies, mice, and other pests? Well, I mentioned fruit flies. Mice we never had an issue with, although the strip mall that we're in actually did have like a mouse problem for some time. We have like a kosher deli, Chinese restaurant, a Five Guys, a Subway, even like this falafel place. Put it this way, we normally don't order food from any of those places, even though they're the closest. We can walk there anytime in 2 minutes. We don't order from any of those places. Not that they're all bad. It's just a matter of we've known like that there's been like a mouse infestation around here, but we've only seen like 1 or 2 mice like during that time. And the thing that we do is we take out trash regularly. We don't leave food out. We don't leave anything out that they want, basically. So essentially, we give them no reason to stay. Let them go to one of the other places. Other pests, we don't really have any other pests, honestly. How do you store bottles, cans empty and full when your space is small? Ozone system? No, we don't have an ozone system. How do we store bottles and cans empty and full? Well, as far as empties, we only order when we're getting ready to bottle. So we store them in our production area right in front of the bottling line, all in a row and sometimes stacked. Or double rowed, actually. No, we don't stack them for bottling days because we wouldn't have enough space to get the forklift in there to bring them back to unstack them. We keep them double rowed in our production area. And we use them almost immediately when we receive them. So we're never really storing a ton of empty bottles, even though we always end up having extras because we're buying full pallets where we might only need 2.6 pallets, something like that. But full, we do have enough storage space in our upstairs area. Let me actually show you guys a real quick picture of our production area, even though this isn't exactly what it is, but I don't know if you guys can see this, but I'm trying to zoom in to this pallet rack over here. If you can still see my shared screen, great. If not, sorry. But if you notice over here, there's like a break in the wall right here. This is a sliding door. That's technically a piece of like a plastic fence. And we have it on a rail here that we literally slide it open to the right. And this whole thing opens up into the second floor of our space. What we normally do, we pick up a pallet on our forklift and we floor load it onto this pallet rack. And then we move it into the second floor off of the pallet rack using a pallet jack, and we move it around upstairs and store it against the wall. It's a huge pain in the ass being in this space, to be honest. But if we didn't think of doing that, I would have never been able to do half of what we've accomplished, especially just production-wise, period. So you have to get creative and adapt. As far as like temperature or anything like that, we just room temperature. We have a heater and AC unit on the second floor. We just, we keep it at reasonable temperatures, usually cooler, preferably than warmer, but that's about it. So I think that's a wrap. This went on for 2 hours. Sorry about that, but I guess you got everything that you paid for. So with that said, I don't see any other questions, so we're going to wrap this up. Again, thank you everybody for purchasing tickets to the first ever MeadCon online. Really hope you got a lot out of all of the presentations that we offered. I really hope you got a lot out of this presentation as well. I hope you guys learned something or have enough to think about if you're looking to open up a meadery, and have some, maybe there's some red flags or some warning signs as to certain things to stay away from or think ahead of. So thank you all again, and we're going to wrap it up for tonight. I'm going to have another mead and head back home to my family, which is sound asleep. So all right, have a good night, everybody, and hopefully hoping to see you guys all very soon in person. So stay safe and mead on.